There is a version of you that you have never fully met. It lives in the silence after an argument you cannot explain, in the flash of irritation at someone who did nothing wrong. In the dream you wake from and immediately try to forget. Carl Jung spent his life studying the parts of the human psyche that we do not show the world, not the polished self, the other one. He called it the shadow, and he believed that until you learn to face it, it will quietly run your life for you. Today we explore 5 questions that Jung believed every person must eventually face. Not comfortable questions, honest ones. Question 1. What do you refuse to see in yourself? Jung described the shadow as the sum of everything a person refuses to acknowledge about themselves, not just the darkness. The unlived strengths too, the ambition you were told was arrogant, the grief you decided made you weak. He wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Think of the person whose anger blindsides everyone around them, but who swears they are the calm one. Or the person who prides themselves on total selflessness, yet burns with quiet resentment when no one notices their sacrifice. The traits you judge most harshly in others are often the traits you have buried deepest in yourself. Not always, but often enough to be worth a long look. The shadow is not the enemy. It is simply the part of you that never received permission to exist. The work is not to destroy what lives in the shadow. It is to stop pretending it isn't there. To ask, with real curiosity rather than judgment, what am I carrying that I have never looked at directly? That question, asked honestly, is already the beginning of something. Question 2. What do you keep seeing in other people that disturbs you? Jung called it projection. It is one of the mind's most elegant defenses. Take whatever you cannot accept about yourself and see it instead in someone else. The coworker whose arrogance infuriates you beyond reason. The friend whose neediness makes you recoil. The stranger on the street who triggers something you cannot name. Jung suggested a question that is almost unbearable in its precision. What if what I cannot stand in them is something I have refused to allow in myself? This is not a comfortable idea. Projection does not mean that the other person is innocent. It means that your intensity of reaction belongs, in part, to you. Rumi wrote, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. I will meet you there." The field Jung was pointing to is the same one. It begins with the willingness to look inward before you look outward. What you judge with the most heat is usually what you most need to understand about yourself. This does not excuse others. The behavior that hurt you was real, but the intensity of your reaction, the disproportionate flare of it, belongs to you. That is the trail worth following. Not to absolve anyone, to understand yourself. Question 3. What mask do you wear to be accepted? Jung named this the persona, from the Latin word for the masks worn by actors in ancient theatre, a constructed self, useful, necessary, and, if confused with the real self, quietly suffocating. Most people build their persona in childhood. They learn which version of themselves gets love and which version gets punished. They become very good at one and exile the other. The good student who learned to need nothing. The helper who forgot how to receive. The achiever who cannot rest. These are not weaknesses. They are armor that was never taken off. The cost of the persona is not always visible. It shows up as exhaustion with no clear cause. As the strange loneliness of being surrounded by people who like you but do not really know you. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He wrote to himself in his private journals, never meant to be read, of the gap between the emperor he performed and the man he was trying to become. The mask, even for the most powerful man in the world, was a weight. The persona is not the problem. Wearing it consciously is the art. The danger is forgetting which one is which. There is a particular kind of freedom that comes from letting one person, just one, see past the performance, not the curated version, the actual one. Something in you relaxes that you did not even know was clenched. That relaxation is not weakness. It is the cost of armor finally set down. Question 4. What are you becoming beneath the surface? Jung called the lifelong process of becoming yourself. Individuation, not self-improvement in the modern sense, not optimization, something older. The slow movement toward wholeness. A caterpillar does not improve, it dissolves. The form that enters the chrysalis does not survive it. What emerges is not the same creature wearing a prettier version of its old skin. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who you were shaped to be, not who is easiest for others to love, who you actually are. This process is not linear. It often begins with crisis, with the loss of something you were certain you needed, with the collapse of a version of yourself that was no longer true." Pema Chödrön wrote about groundlessness, those moments when the floor disappears and there is nothing to stand on. She called it the beginning of wisdom. Jung would have agreed. The falling apart is often what allows the real shape to emerge. Individuation is not achieved. It is lived, every day, in the small choices between what is comfortable and what is true. Question 5. What would it mean to be whole? Not perfect. Whole. Jung drew a careful distinction between the two. Perfection is the elimination of everything unacceptable. Wholeness is the integration of everything real. A whole person is not one who has conquered their shadows. It is one who has met them. Who can sit with their darkness without being consumed by it? Who can feel fear and choose anyway? Buddhist teacher Ajahn Chah described the awakened mind as a still forest pool, not empty, full of fish and movement and life, but undisturbed at its depths. Jung's wholeness has the same quality, not absence of complexity, presence within it. Wholeness requires that you stop organizing yourself into acceptable and unacceptable, that you stop exiling the parts that complicate the story you tell about who you are. Jung wrote, "I would rather be whole than good." The goodness he was rejecting was not ethics. It was the performed goodness that requires the shadow to go unacknowledged. Real goodness, he believed, comes only from a person who knows what they are capable of. These 5 questions are not asked once and answered. They are returned to, season after season, at different ages, with different eyes. What do you refuse to see in yourself? That question will look completely different at 20 and 40 and 60. The shadow deepens as we do. What you keep seeing in others, that too shifts. You discover that an old hatred was an old grief, that a recurring irritation was an unmet need in a disguise so good you couldn't recognize it. The mask you wear to be accepted grows lighter when you finally let someone see what's beneath it, and you find that what you feared would drive them away sometimes pulls them closer. And beneath the surface of your becoming, something has always been moving, patient, not rushed, in the direction of who you were before the world told you who to be. What the Jungian tradition asks of you is not easy. It asks that you be curious where you would rather be certain, honest where you would rather be comfortable. Present to what is real, not only to what is flattering. It asks you to sit with discomfort long enough to hear what it is actually saying. Most people never do. They reach for something easier, and so the same patterns find them again. And wholeness, real wholeness, is not a destination. It is a practice of returning again and again to the questions that matter most. If this reached you at the right moment, subscribe. New videos every week on the wisdom traditions, the inner life, and the questions that make a life worth examining.